Well, hello, and I have to adjust my mic a little bit. And so, this Mystic Brew, which I'm almost was thinking about calling Mystic Woo because of where I'm going to take it, this is about Antarctica and the message coming out. And when I say the message coming out, it's kind of what I'm hearing coming out. I was going to do a completely different Mystic Brew, but somebody sent me a link to the latest Dark Journalist interview with Joseph Farrell, and the topic was Antarctica. And I had heard most of the information in there, but never like as one blanket thing. And also I heard it in the past months, in the past weeks, and this last week of mine has been well, the months have been building, but lately the state of mind, the mystical state of mind that I find myself in, has just made any incoming information so rich in corresponding gnosis or, intuition, call it what you will. But I tend to, my intuition is, I will sometimes kind of, regard it as lesser or greater because it comes in different strengths. So lighter intuition, I kind of wait for some confirmation or whether it just kind of fades. Strong intuition, I tend to follow greater, and some of that strong intuition turns into what I would call gnosis or knowing, as opposed to I believe or I think. No, this is what I feel as a knowing. And so I put it out. I'll put it out there. I'll share it, and we'll see. But I wouldn't, trying to be reliable and come from a place of integrity makes me very measured in what I will put out there. So let's start with Antarctica and why I think it's important. And in many ways, this Mystic Brew is tying into the Mystic Brew that said the battle for humanity. That originally the full title was Danger Will Robinson, the battle for humanity. But I thought the Danger Will Robinson was a little hokey, and but it does tie in because it, that was about the robot in Lost in Space, and they were in kind of a spaceship. And for me, what I get from this Antarctica thing is something that's been coming out in my various Mystic Brews, if you are following them, and that is the danger of an organized disclosure. And I know for many people it's like, what do you mean the danger of disclosure? Well, the danger comes from who's doing the disclosing. And I've touched on the fact that the Vatican has made strange things about dealing with ETs. And then we have two statements. There's a statement that's very recent, and actually, it took me a hard time to find it. Apparently, the original statement is in some obscure Italian newspaper. I think it's called Al Repubblica or something. But the person who I heard the report from was an interview by Leo Zagami on the Alex Jones show. And it was an hour and 18 minutes long, and the information that I needed was like in the last 15 minutes. Talk about dedication to the purpose here. I mean, I won't say I'm a fan of Alex Jones, but I do pay attention to the news that he covers, not the tirades in between the things that he covers. His tirades can really be a bit much, but I guess a lot of people really like that. So part of the kind of known news. Oh, sorry. Let me get back to this statement. There are some kind of things circulating, and one of them was, I guess, by this author Malaki Martin, saying that a lot of things point to Pope Francis being the last pope. Just hold that. Just hold that as a possibility. that Pope Francis is the last pope. And then I guess it was last year, I think Queen Elizabeth at Christmas said something about this being the last Christmas. I don't know if anybody recalls that. I remember we discussed it in Global Mission of Peace and in a few other places. But Global Mission of Peace is where I have the discussions with people I've spent the last 2 years with, and we tend to speak about things like that. And I think even our friend that we call the ambassador, I think he also had brought that out. So which led to lots of, what does that mean? Let me stroke my beard here. I think this ties in to what I am feeling and intuiting very strongly, and is really coming into like, this is something that is good to talk about. And that is disclosure. Now, when we get to the facts, the non-woo part of this, the brew and not the woo, we get to, some of the people who were down there, and this is on record. John Kerry, and he happened to go down there during the election, and he said he was down there to get information about climate change, something that you can get you can order that as a report on your desk. So that's a flimsy reason that he was there. Prince Harry was down there. King Juan Carlos of Spain was down there. Patriarch Kirill of the Russian Orthodox Church was down there. Buzz Aldrin, one of the Apollo astronauts, was down there, and there's a few others, but those are the ones that I kind of just stuck out, and maybe that's enough. But these are not just pedestrians by any means, and I wouldn't quite call everybody on the list part of what I would usually call a rogues gallery, but there's certainly a rogue or two in here. Like I said, a rogue or two. So maybe there's only one rogue. Maybe it is two, and maybe it is more. If I had to run it down, Kerry, well, I put him on the rogues list. Prince Harry, I would say call him an emissary for the Queen. Patriarch Kirill, I would say gathering intelligence for the Russian Orthodox Church. He was said to go down there to bless, I guess, the Russians have a station down there and they have an Orthodox Church, and he was there to consecrate it or bless it. And apparently that is blessing those kinds of churches is a tradition. It's not, you don't need the head of that church or the most eminent of that church to do that. Him going all the way down there to confer a blessing could have been done by somebody of less stature than himself. So him going there to me is gathering intelligence. And then we have King Juan Carlos. Maybe he went because he could. And then we have Buzz Aldrin. Buzz Aldrin I consider one of the more interesting names of visitors there. One is apparently this interesting tweet that he supposedly tweeted out just before boarding the plane is I'm off to the launch pad. And it's an interesting tweet because you can interpret that in a number of ways. He could have been using the launch pad for boarding the plane he was about to board. Right? He's an astronaut using a little astronaut jargon, getting ready to go to the boarding pad. And you do board a plane, or is it a launching pad? I'm sorry. He did use a launching pad is what he used. But Buzz has been in space, for those of us who do believe that there is an outer space. So apparently some don't. And he was one of the people on the moon, if you buy the story. Now, I have seen certain pictures. There are certain pictures that actually show stars in the sky. Those are obviously fake. but I've also seen pictures with a black sky. Those very, very probably are real if we went to the moon, because the stars that we see are a manifestation of coming through the atmosphere. You don't see the stars in space. From what I know of, you can't see the sun in space without an atmosphere. And you might say, what about, suspicious observers? They're looking at different angstrom levels. There's different filters, but whether or not the sun's invisible in space is not the nature of this mystic brew. So why would they ask Buzz Aldrin to come to Antarctica? Well, let's again, we're gonna indulge in a little supposition, like suppose he did something. So suppose he was on the moon and saw things. And supposedly there are structures on the moon. So if he did go to the moon and he did see some of those structures, perhaps they would want him at Antarctica to say, do these structures look familiar? Now let's say he didn't see any structures. Let's say he didn't go to the moon. Let's say he was just in space. Well, we all know that apparently the astronauts get quite a few visits from other craft in space, or at least that's what seems to be the story. So another thing might be, they might have him down there isn't, do you recognize these buildings, but do you recognize these craft? Anyway, Buzz was suddenly beset by some kind of illness and had to be airlifted off of Antarctica to South America. Something happened to Buzz, because they wouldn't have airlifted him out if something didn't happen. Maybe he just exploded. Maybe, again, these astronauts are tough. These are tough men. Astronauts are tough men. So who knows? He might have had a tirade, or he just saw things that it was like, ooh. Or he saw things and then found out, got a little bit of what was brewing, and that made his heart weak. Because what I think is brewing could weaken the heart if it gets pulled off. Now let me just put on my glasses for a little second here so I can follow it. So we have the message is coming out. Then, so like even before, when I was getting ready, I realized Jordan Sather of Destroying the Illusion had put out a video just 3 hours before I began this, or maybe I was at 1 o'clock. I forget. This has been in preparation now since midnight, and it's now 10 minutes of 4 a.m. But anyway, apparently Jordan was looking for a book list, and he gave a list of 4 books he's reading, which is not really important, in my opinion. One of them was the Kabbalion. Another one, it's not important. But he was asking people, what books are you reading? And because it's not about the messenger who, referring to himself, it's about the message. And let me tell you, that set alarms off from me. And again, it didn't set off alarms about Jordan. It set off alarms about what I see as intelligence gathering. And why would and let's say if he was intelligence gathering, it could, again, we know that he's involved with Disclosure Now, and he and Teresa both kind of launched their business plans and different things on the same day. There's some coordination going on there, and I'm not saying it's malevolent, but there's coordination. All right, there is coordination, and so as some of the people who are trying to help people like Jordan and Teresa be more effective in what they're doing, they might have said, hey, might have, please, my language is important, might have said, hey, Jordan, let's find out, what people are reading, because it's about the message, not the messenger. So what I heard there, and this could be with my suspicious hat on, But when we're dealing with organizations and systems, my suspicion hat is always on about the system, not necessarily the people. People get their direction from that system. And it might have been a person that gave it, but it's still a system. And the only system we belong in is the ecosystem. So why might they want to know what the disclosure crowd, the New Agers, the truth community, why might they want to know what messages they're keen on, or that they think is truth? Why? And I think the reason why is because there's a message that needs to be crafted by Mr. Spaceman. And I've spoken about this. Like I said, I read something from last September in 2016 about what I call the disclosure scenario. And that it would be orchestrated to create an umbrella to pull in people under one world. Maybe it will be called a religion. Maybe it'll be called a new philosophy. Who knows what they're going to call it? But the control system doesn't have everybody scooped in neatly. It's a management nightmare to manage us humans with believing this and we're off here, we're off here. The three main Abrahamic religions are relative. They kind of have their people relatively managed. But these New Agers, man, they're all over the place. And so Jordan now has 30,000 followers. What do you 30,000? And they're kind of a cross section of the truth community, the disclosure community. So, what kind of messages are they looking for? I hope you see where I'm going here. Where, to me, this is an intelligence gathering to understand what kind of message needs to be crafted so that it has maximum efficacy when it is delivered. Now, I don't think that this message will just be that. I mean, they have to. This umbrella they're building will include the world's religions, or at least the Abrahamic religions, which has a few billion people belonging to it. Obviously, the Jewish part of the Abrahamic religions is relatively small compared to the billions of Catholics, though the billion Catholics will say, and the billion Muslims. That's a big package. And then who knows what other priest heads might just go underneath there. Right now, fundamentalist Hinduism seems to be doing pretty well under Modi of India. And so I feel that Mr. Spaceman, to have the biggest umbrella or snare, but we'll use the umbrella. But again, who's building this umbrella is the question. Who built it? Who's building it? And so I'm quite sure that through the Vatican, which is really the most kind of like effective, and it's the oldest power structure of this priestly craft, which is mind control. I'm quite sure they have that part of the message crafted. So now what do we do with all these other people that have kind of more or less rejected the revealed faiths? And if you I will just recall that when I looked up what a person or a human was, as opposed to, then there was about a natural person, and a natural person was considered on a par with an animal, because natural persons are those who are not part of some kind of revealed truth. All right? So this is something against nature. This message will be not pro-nature. Trust me. It will not be pro-ecosystem. although there might be some kind words. But as we see, most people don't really have much grounding in science, which is why the whole CO2 thing flies. For people who really don't know science and aren't scientists that have been bought off, the CO2 thing is so nonsensical, it's ridiculous. But that's just part of okay, so that's just kind of showing that the something could look like it's pro ecosystem, but to the uninformed who don't really know how the ecosystem works, like in a chemical way, it would be very easy to do something quite unnatural, quite not good for the ecosystem, like depletion of carbon dioxide, which the trees need that make the oxygen that we breathe. Just a little thing like that. So I feel that there's a crafting of a message, and right now the finishing touches need to be put into place, because now we're going to come back to Queen Elizabeth's statement of we may be celebrating the last Christmas. The next Christmas is only a few months away, maybe 5. So that's if her words are to be taken seriously, there aren't a lot of months left to end Christmas. You go, well, what's with the disclosure in the ending of Christmas? There's a new revelation coming. So clearly, she probably knows that at a minimum, there could be a bursting of all the Abrahamic faiths, but the way things are looking to me, the one that is really on a target list would be Christianity, or at least the Roman Western branch of Christianity, because the Eastern Orthodox is slightly different. It's one of the reasons why kind of the Western people, one of the quiet things as they're in Syria, and you hear about all these Syrians and, civilians dying, you don't know just how many of them are the original Christians. Don't forget, Paul had his revelation on the road to Damascus. So the original breeding ground of Christianity was in places like Syria and all in that area. The most ancient of Christians live in that area. So again, so the I'm quite sure that so that ties into why, if this plan jumps off, and I'm going to get to even some timing based on some sky watching and other things, it would be the last Christmas that we celebrated would be the last time Christmas, at least as it's tied into the birth of Jesus, and it would be bust. Okay? And I think that's in their plans. I'm not saying that's what I think is coming. I'm saying that's what's in their plans. No, that's what they're planning. So what else do we have here? Because this is oh my God. So the G20. Now we have the G20 meeting. There were a lot of meetings and agreements that were made between two very big players, which would be the United States and Russia, and one of the agreements was settling the fuckery in Syria. And it looks like they have agreements which they haven't given the details of, and I think that's really good, because what we know that the MSM will just fling a lot of crap around, because they are little more than turd flinging monkeys. Truly. Let me mute my mic for a second. There you go, spared you that one. So the G20 meeting, there were some serious agreements that were made between the United States and Russia. We'll leave the names of personalities out, because some of those names trigger people. And then what I stuck around and endured over more than an hour of Alex Jones, and I had to, was listening to an interview he had with Leo Zagami. Some of you might know who Leo Zagami is. Now, when Leo Zagami goes off on certain things, we sometimes wonder whether or not we should go there. But it was actually telling us about something that during this an article that was in some Italian MSM newspaper, and And the interesting thing was that in this little dialogue, nothing about there's this big bust of some kind of pedo ring with a pretty high placed Vatican official. All right, well, that's not part of it. What was in there apparently, and one of the things that the Pope declared, was that Russia and the USA are problems, or as if they were the enemy. So the possible last pope seems to have a problem with Russia and the United States. I find that very interesting. And because people are still kind of divided on who's good, who's bad, I'm leaving names out and even certain things. Because what I'm doing here is trying to offer things that for consideration, and by leaving certain personalities out, I think I might find it more considerable. There are certain people, you just mention a certain name or a certain thing, and that's it. They're gone. They'll turn off the video. They might unsubscribe. People are really quite delicate right now, and I honor that delicacy by trying to choose my words with great care. So Russia and the USA are a problem from Pope Francis. The problems he's having with naughty priests apparently isn't as troubling to him as what the United States and Russia are doing, and coming out of and this was based on the G20 meeting. So apparently what alarmed him was that it looks like Russia and the United States might be starting to get along, at least at the elected leader level. That troubled him. And what troubles the Pope makes me smile a little bit. I just, what can I say? He's not my idea of a savory human. So what do I think about the timing of all this? Okay, now the timing I've spoken about a little bit. There's a form of looking at the sky, and when you see those various observatories around, and you see there's really quite a few of them still standing in Central and South America and in Mexico. Apart from the pyramids, they have sky observatories. And most people probably think that observing the sky, astrology. Now, to be fair, astronomy is the ungrateful child of astrology. What people knew initially about astronomy was from the sky watchers who were watching it for signs and portents. And so when astronomy inherited, I call it ungrateful because they got a lot of information from those people, but meanwhile they're calling them superstitious. And I'm going to cover that a little bit too. In other words, they're engaging in the supernatural or other things like that. We're going to get to the word supernatural in my closing paragraphs. So in sky watching, what's of particular note is we have what is known as a zodiac. That's one system, and that's astrology. Okay, you have the zodiac, the signs of the zodiac, and then you have the planets moving through the signs of the zodiac. That's astrology. Sky watching, or messages from what was considered by the ancients to be a view arranged for us by the creator of all, not there's fractalizations, but when you're putting together the sky, or at least from we're talking important. So what is of interest right now is, from the sky watches, the constellation of Virgo, not the sign of Virgo. The constellation of Virgo currently has the planet Jupiter in it. Actually, I'll call up my browser here. And Jupiter is currently, and when you have the constellations, you have the stars, and then you have the imagined figures of the stars. And they follow, so the stars are kind of an outline, and then you get what that picture in the sky is. So from that picture in the sky of Virgo, who happens to, from the sky watch in the old Magian concept, was the constellation that actually represented the Earth, or more correctly, the Earth Mother or Mother Nature, okay, the primordial goddess. So that's what Virgo represents in the sky. Not the constellation, not the sign, not the zodiac, the constellation. Because currently, Jupiter is in Virgo's belly. It's starting to move out, but right now it's in there because but it happens to be in the zodiacal sign of Libra. So here's why there's a difference between astrology. When sky watchers are not taking so much notice of Jupiter being in Libra, it's in the constellation of Virgo. And this is much more ancient. And on September 24th, Jupiter emerges from Virgo's belly. Okay? So we could say her belly, the belly of the constellation that represents the Earth Mother. So that means basically she's pregnant. And then on the 24th, she gives birth. That's kind of what the sky watching would indicate. So why don't we look at Jupiter? So I guess I'll transition so you don't have to see my face, and I'm going to go to my browser so I can see a little bit better. Jupiter, planet of luck. Jupiter is the thinking person's planet. As the guardian of the abstract mind, this planet rules higher learning and bestows upon us a yen for exploring ideas, both intellectually and spiritually. Intellectually speaking, Jupiter assists us in formulating our ideology. In the more spiritual realm, Jupiter lords over religions and philosophy. All right, so at the intellectual, it's about ideologies, and then on the spiritual, over religions and philosophy, which are often the bedrock of our ideologies or our ideologies themselves. This is my own wording now. Okay, back to the text. A search for the answers is what Jupiter proposes. And if it means spanning the globe to find them, well, that's probably why Jupiter also rules long-distance travel. In keeping with this theme, Jupiter compels us to assess our ethical and moral values. It also addresses our sense of optimism. Okay, that's one. Then there's another one. Jupiter is the largest planet in our solar system, and it symbolizes the strength of expansion. It is a general symbol of authority and knowledge. Science and sportsmanship are also under its reign. If Jupiter makes a benign aspect, it increases possessions, make blah, 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 blah. It's a lot of junk there. Okay. There's a last one. Okay. All right. So anyways, that first reading is one I liked. And now what I want to do is, this here shows where Jupiter is and what zodiacal sign now. Because now we're going to combine the two of them together. So what we see is that right now, Jupiter is in Libra. Libra is represented by the scales, and the scales are the signs for justice. And then on October 10th, Jupiter enters Scorpio. So Jupiter leaves the belly of the constellation Virgo on the 24th of September, while it's in the zodiacal sign of Libra or the scales. I just want to look one more second over here. So just keep those, and then in October 10th, a very short while after Jupiter has emerged from the belly of Virgo, it goes into Scorpio. And okay, I think there was one other thing in here that I was looking at. Yes. Okay. Luck and good fortune are associated with Jupiter for good reason. This is a kind and benevolent planet, one that wants us to grow and flourish in a positive way. Jupiter may be judge and jury, but it is mostly an honorable helpmate, seeing to it that we're on the right path. All right, so that's my little finish up. I wanted to give you some information of where I'm going with here. So I just think that, talk about the Virgo being pregnant, I think that what I just read is pregnant with meaning if the birth of Jupiter means the releasing onto Earth from these energies. Now, Libra, again, the sign of the scales or justice. Jupiter, judge and jury. Kind, benevolent planet, one that wants us to grow and flourish in a positive way. So that's where I actually feel, that's why I kind of say this is what they plan. Now, they might, when you're reading from different eyes and you think you might be the good guys, you might think that that bodes well for you. But you can't have an anti-human agenda and have this apply well for you. Those of us who want to be part of nature, and it also, they mentioned that about, there's a natural thing there. Anyway, so what I'm getting is that, so recently, I think it was President Putin had said something about you either do something about the child traffickers and pedophiles in your government, talking to the USA, or in other words, you disclose that or we'll do it. And then I read somewhere else where he also said you either disclose ET or we'll do it. And I think I covered this a little bit in the Mystic Brew. But again, the window for when I think, to me, they plan to, the non-human type, the fuckery masters, obviously, to me, based on Queen Elizabeth's pronouncement, this is supposed to go down before Christmas. I don't think I'm the only one that pays attention to this stuff. And I have a feeling that maybe President Putin pays a little attention also. Now, he might not be sky watching. He might just have good intel. Hacking into everything. So there, to me, one of the things that actually makes the United States so unmanageable and why its representatives can't represent its people is because so many of them are compromised or blackmailed. So by exposing those who are compromised, you can get rid of the people who are answering to blackmailers instead of to the population or the voters or their districts or their states. And that would bring some form of sanity. Boy, I'm seeing little orbs on my right eye. That would bring some form of sanity to the United States. And a little sanity for the United States means a little sanity for this planet. And so I think that's one. And then the whole ET disclosure, why there might be pressing and why there was a little announcement a month or so back about life being on the space station as kind of like a preparation for there's life out there. That's the main biological life out there. To me is the fact that this is probably going to go down before Christmas. If they do it, it's going to happen before Christmas, which is probably why Queen Elizabeth said this might be, or this could be, our last Christmas. Again, she's intelligent enough to know that just because they have plans doesn't mean that the timing is going to be right, but this is their window for sure. And obviously that there's a hint that before this Christmas is certainly on their calendar they're on their to-do list. So just to kind of end on a little bit of a good note, although I think again, even with all of this, I still think I have good expectations for a positive outcome, because I think that what Jupiter represents something healthy for the natural people on the planet. And so even though I do have some trepidation about what is planned, and if it did get pulled off, it would be terrible. And I covered that in a Mystic Brew or two ago. about, again, if you suddenly have billions of people belonging to a new revelation, anybody who doesn't buy into it becomes the new heretics. And heretics never get treated well, and especially if everybody gets united and there's no safe place. There's only the believers and there's the non-believers. And every time the non-believers have been on the lesser armed side of the believers, it never goes down well. Ask the Native Americans. So then we have the Oracle of Delphi. And there were two... Oh, let me, before I go, I'm going to close with that. So now let's get to concepts like sky watching, maybe astrology, and things that fall into what we call the supernatural. Ooh, supernatural. That has a strange ring in certain places. It always seems kind of like, could be good, could be bad. Well, I guess that might be a correct assessment, because in the natural world, if you go in the ocean, there are sharks in there. The natural world has its dangers. I don't consider sharks a villain. Sharks are sharks. Sharks are going to do what a shark does. And apparently a rhino that thinks you're on your territory will do what a rhino does. Water buffaloes are known for being quite aggressive. The natural world is the natural world, and we are a part of it. We are part of nature. And so the whole thing is, when you there's a lot of the systems on the planet do not honor nature. Again, their law doesn't honor the natural man. The natural man is equivalent to a beast. All right? So if a natural man or woman is considered on a par with an animal, then obviously nature itself, however you want to frame it, is part of the problem also. There is, again, what is wrong with the controllers on this planet is they hate natural humans and they hate nature, which is why we have an ecological disaster on our hands. So supernatural, though, super means above. Okay, like in anatomical language, super or supra, that means what's above. So you have a natural world, nature, and then you have supernature or supernatural. It's a continuum. Basically, nature. You have a matter-based nature, and then you have more of an energy or etheric-based nature. It's a continuum. The supernatural is the part above the natural world. It isn't some spooky place, although again, the supernatural world is another ecosystem. And it has some critters, and it has some benevolent beings. It's kind of like the planet. And so it can be an interesting place, but it isn't some kind of place where supernatural just is always cast in as this darkness. The supernatural is as natural as nature. I just would like to do that. And then for closing, I want to go to kind of what some of the last remnants that we can pull some of the wisdom that existed on this planet for tens of thousands of years, and some of the extant and existing oral traditions of native peoples can give us a clue. Some of the more science-based people who still came out of those traditions had slightly more eloquent ways, maybe, of putting it, or more science. They had a science based on nature, and that was definitely a part of what had to be cleared out of Alexandria. It's why the Cathars had to go down. Apparently the Templars found out some stuff that they shouldn't have found out, and they had to go. I mean, they didn't get all of them, but they got some of them. So at the Oracle of Delphi, where the priestesses who spoke were called Pythoness. Isn't that interesting? There's that old serpent rearing its head again. But anyway, at the Oracle of Delphi, they had two doors. I guess one was an entrance and one was an exit. So since I don't know which door is which with these sayings, there were two sayings, one above each door. One door said, "Know thyself." The other door said, "Nothing in excess." And so what I'm going to do here is that there is a nice, now this is from Ancient Origins, which is, talks about history. And I guess even before I read it, I'll just very quickly say, history is obviously the Patriarch's history. And then so certain people, and then when you get into some of the more clear Anunnaki or Sumerian and Akkadian text, and I don't mean by Zecharia Sitchin. Sitchin at least hipped us, to his credit, he hipped us that there was some information we should know about. Him as a translator and then the data coordinator, we could do better without what he had to say about things, but he did alert us to it, and there have been some really good people who followed up with very good translations. Anton Parks, I highly recommend. But where am I going with that? Oh yeah. So it's funny what you see in some of the more responsibly or actually academically translated texts, and Anton Parks complained that he actually got some texts from people who had done translations and they left out whole blocks because they didn't sit well with biblical narratives, and so they either didn't translate it or they didn't put the translations in. Anton Parks puts those translations in, and we see that it's actually let's say call it a combination of history and herstory. Now, just to be really clear, I think that a history or a herstory is not the way to go. What we want is, what is our story? Because the real operative word at all times, the word of unity, divine or otherwise, it is we and us. Those are the pronouns of inclusion, not history or herstory. Our story is what we're after. And so we have the Oracle of Delphi, which know thyself and nothing in excess. And I'm just going to close with what I thought was sweet. And the reason I went off on that little tangent is because this is from Ancient Origins, which is history. They even when you look when I look at its URL, it's www.ancientorigins.net. History, ancient traditions, ancient Greek symposium, and then the question they ask, as usual, whenever they're pointing to these older traditions, they're trying to make it look like it was distasteful and bad. So they write the ancient Greek symposium, just an excuse for debauchery. Oh yes, just an excuse for debauchery. I mean, it makes me sick. This is like mainstream news, interpreting things and always casting whatever happens in like a handshake can turn into a conspiracy, and it's not even a Masonic handshake. All right, now they used to during the Greeks mixed their wine with water. They didn't serve the wine straight. They were kind of into temperance. And they used to mix them into things called kraters, Kraters. And this was from kind of a record of a man who had a symposium. And very often the symposiums were attended by men, because at this point, the Greeks already had their gods, and Zeus was the head. They were, was already becoming a patrix. But still, their wisdom was in a fair amount of abundance there. So just to give you an idea, this ties into nothing in excess. And he says, for sensible men, remember, a crater is a preparation of wine and water. For sensible men, I prepare only 3 kraters, one for health, which they drink first, the second for love and pleasure, and the third for sleep. And I just want to, I'll continue with the narrative. And generally, what it is like the first one for health was probably more water than wine, or half and half, let's say, whatever the mixture was. That was one for health. The second, for love and pleasure, clearly would have more wine in it. And the third is for sleep, and that probably would have had a lot more wine with just a little water in it. After onto the return of the text, very short, almost done. After the third one is drained, wise men go home. The fourth crater is not mine anymore. It belongs to bad behavior. The fifth is for shouting. The sixth is for rudeness and insults. The seventh is for fights. The eighth is for breaking the furniture. The ninth is for depression. The 10th is for madness and unconsciousness. Nothing in excess. And I will say goodbye to you here. This went a lot longer than I thought, but I guess it had to be what it had to be. I have all kinds of mystic brews planned. I have one that was written up for earlier tonight, but I decided to go all Antarctica on you. And I hope that you found the message coherent and meaningful. And so remember to love each other, a love for all, hatred for none. That means no people. Go unleash your wrath on systems, though. And stay as sane as you can. And I'll see you next time.